Thank you, Paul.
All right, rolling.
We are now ready to go into the second phase of regression therapy. Phase 2, regression techniques to discover the cause or causes. And at this point, let me digress and mention that the reason there can be more than one cause, even for a single situation such as fear of flying, is that you have what Charles Tevitz called an original sensitizing event, which is typically called the initial sensitizing event. Different phrase for the same thing. And I choose to go with...
Excuse me, different phrase from the same thing, and I choose to go with, starting on 5, 4, 3.
I choose to go with initial sensitizing event, which is different phrasing for what Charlie called the original sensitizing event, simply because people understand ISE in the hypnotherapy community around the world, and I'm not hung up on using the terminology that Charlie used. But basically what you're going after is the first time a client had feelings that are associated or connected with a particular problem. So if you look at the timeline, going back from childhood on up to adulthood, there is one point in time where a client was originally sensitized to a particular problem, be it a fear or an anxiety or a self-esteem issue or some other problem that's associated either directly or indirectly with his or her presenting problem. And with the affect bridge technique, it's very effective in connecting to emotions, but you don't always have the emotions on the surface, particularly if it's a situation such as weight control, where that lady I mentioned earlier today had an initial sensitizing event that was discovered through age regression that had to do with her mother imprinting her that someday you'll be big and people won't push you around. And her subconscious interpreted big as wide rather than tall. At any rate, you can have scores of subsequent sensitizing events, or SSEs, or hundreds or even thousands of SSEs through the years. But you only have one initial sensitizing event, one first time. You always have to discover that initial sensitizing event if you want the client to be able to have permanent, lasting release from the problem. And you may have an activating event that is one and the same as the initial sensitizing event, or it can happen minutes, days, weeks, months, or years after the ISE. In one example, when I actually facilitated regression to discover and release the core cause of one of my students having a fear of snakes, the activating event actually took place just a few minutes after the ISE. I used the affect bridge in a classroom, and she goes back in time, but instead of having this real negative abreaction, "Oh, cute, wiggly." I said, "What's cute and wiggly?" "Little snakey." So here she had a horrible fear of snakes. But affect bridge takes her back to the ISE. She's holding a snake. "Oh, cute, wiggly," and she's smiling. Well, what happens now? Daddy says, "Drop the snake, run, run, run for your life, run for your life, run for your life." Well, what do? I drop the snake and I run up to the porch where my brother's watching. Well, what happens now? Daddy is using words that Mommy should wash his mouth out with soap for. And he's smashing a snake to a pulp with a shovel. So her core cause was authority imprint. Her father imprinted his fear of snakes onto his 3-year-old daughter at the time. So I followed the procedures that you're going to learn in depth by taking her to her peaceful place, going back and having her do Gestalt with Dad, and then confirmed that there was more to discover and release. So that was the ISE, but it wasn't the activating event. Then from there, I want you to move forward in time to a very significant event. Where are you? I'm sitting in a front room watching TV. What happens now? My brother drops a garden snake on my lap. Run, run, run for your life, run for your life. And this apparently was just like about 10 to 15 minutes after the ISE. So she runs screaming outside because she was impressionable by her dad freaking out with the snake. Turned out she still wasn't clear of it, so there was an SSE that had to be looked at. And she moves forward in time to a frat party when she's in college. And the host has this big snake draped over his neck. And she said to her boyfriend, "Don't let me go near that snake." And he says, "Okay, what would you like me to get you to drink?" So he disappears allegedly to get her some drinks, and then walks back with the frat host and throws a snake over her neck. She runs out the door of the frat house screaming and keeps running. Run, run, run for your life was the button that was pushed. She almost gets run over by a car, and she's on the other side of the road realizing she almost got hit and killed by a car. And I don't remember whether the snake got killed or not, but the snake was dumped in the middle of the road somewhere.
Oh, she had the snake with her?
They put it on her.
Her idiotic boyfriend threw the snake
Yeah,
over
but
her
I didn't
neck.
think she had it with her.
She runs out, snake on her, and she can't get rid of the snake till she's about halfway across the street. Throws the snake in the middle of the street. She's on the other side of the street. There was a honking horn and a screeching of brakes, so she almost got run over. A person doesn't react logically when they have a phobia. So it ended up that her subconscious had an additional SSE that I had to discover and release. So in her case, she had 3 contributing causes. She had her ISE, an activating event, and an additional subsequent sensitizing event that the subconscious deemed important enough to clear. I let the subconscious determine. Usually when you get the ISE and the activating event, all of the SSEs topple over like dominoes. But every once in a while you'll have 1 or 2 that remain standing, and you'll have to go back and clear in another regression. In her case, I had to have that event cleared also. So when the session was over, one of the students said, "I hope you dumped the
I was
boyfriend."
gonna say, released him too.
She said, "Actually I did, and the next man that came along is the father of my children."
Oh,
So that had a happy ending.
yeah, for sure.
But she was so terrified of snakes that she couldn't even look at a picture of a snake, because her brother would come in and put a picture of a snake in front of her. "Snakey's gonna get you, run, run, run for your life, Snakey's gonna get you." Siblings can really be cruel.
Yeah, yeah.
If you happen to need a person to work on, I have a snake problem. I don't know that it's a phobia, but if I see a snake on a page, I will scream. If I'm looking through a magazine.
Even though you logically know that snake's not gonna harm you.
Yeah, because I had a very similar situation where
Wow.
I was playing, I was 3 years old, and my uncle came out from Texas, and he took a gun, and so I saw the snake, rise up and split in 2 in front of me.
Oh, yuck.
And it just, and he was elated, which was even worse because
Oh, no.
he seemed thrilled that he had, shot the snake. So, anyway, yeah.
Well, at any rate, sometimes when you do a regression for a problem, you may not know whether the event the subconscious stopped you at is the ISE or the activating event. And that's why idiomotor response questions are so important for a later phase. But what you have to do is master several different regression techniques to discover the cause. Whether that cause is a ISE or the activating event, it's either going to be the total cause or a partial cause, or one of, in some cases, 3 or 4 contributing causes of a problem. So your second phase is to choose a regression technique that's applicable to the client. When emotions are involved, I like to use affect bridge, but not everyone will respond to affect bridge. The typical ones you'll see summarized in the bold print on page 13. Age regression, count back by age. Regression by calendar years, you go back by date. Pleasant place, you can start at a happy scene from childhood, and I know there's one of you in this room that uses that, because I was informed of such during the break. Charles Tebbets liked to use that if he didn't use the affect bridge, only he called the affect bridge a feeling connection because you use emotions to connect to the original starting point of those same feelings. But since affect bridge is terminology that's used around hypnotherapy community and the mental health community, I call it affect bridge. I no longer call it the feeling connection like I did my first few years in the profession. Specific event, you go directly back to a specific event when known, and I no longer use this for regression to discover core cause because of the fact more often than not the client's preconceived opinion about the core cause is wrong. But you need to know about regression to specific event because that's what you'll do if you're using a forensic application of hypnosis or if you're guiding a client back to remember where they stashed a lost item. And I've had a number of clients over the years come to me for that. I had this beautiful 25th anniversary dinner ring that my husband bought me, and he's taking me out to the yacht club next Saturday night, and I can't find my ring. I know I hid it someplace to keep it safe, and I hid it so well I can't even find it. Sound familiar? Have any of you had clients with requests like that? So what I do is I ask them before trance begins to tell me the last time they consciously remember having the item and where they were. And I start them there, and then I move forward in time from that point. What do you do next? And most of the time, it's successful, but not all the time. One time when a lady couldn't remember what she did, she remembered standing up from the couch. I stand up from the couch, I have it in my hand, I have to go hide it. Well, where do you go next? I don't remember, everything's a big fog. Even in somnambulism, everything was a big fog. So I concluded that session after making several different attempts because I'm very persistent. By giving suggestions to the effect of there's a part of your subconscious that has a record of everything you've ever experienced through any of your 5 senses. And that part of your subconscious knows where that ring is. And I don't know whether you'll remember consciously or whether your subconscious will simply cause you to intuitively look someplace. But you can be pleasantly surprised, and I don't know if it'll happen this afternoon or within a day or within a couple days. But you can be pleasantly surprised when your subconscious causes you to discover where you hid that ring. And she was crying when she left the office because she was so sad that the session wasn't successful. And she goes home, and about 2 hours later I get this phone call. Oh, you'll never guess what happened! She was putting dishes away from the dishwasher and said she just spontaneously, without thinking about it, turned around and opened the china cabinet and took the lid off of a teacup, or a small miniature teapot, and there was her ring. So her subconscious did exactly what I suggested that it do. At any rate, regression to specific event is applicable for forensic hypnosis or for finding lost items. But it's not advisable for discovering core causes, because if either you or the client have that preconceived opinion, you have better than a 50-50 chance that it's not the correct place to go. And I no longer choose to gamble with those odds. I don't choose to gamble with it, but since the client's my employer, I have occasionally had a hypnotherapist insist that I regress him or her to a specific event. Isn't it amazing? More often than not, it's not the core cause. Although that being said, a couple of years ago, there was someone who saw me for fear of flying and knew that the fear of flying started with a specific event that happened when an engine was spewing fire and they had to turn around and make an emergency landing. Turned out that wasn't the ISE, but it was the activating event. So it was part of the core cause, but not all of the core cause. The ISE happened years earlier during the World Series earthquake when this lady was 50 floors up in a skyscraper in San Francisco and the building is built to bend rather than break during an earthquake. Can you imagine being near a window with 50 floors up while this building is moving back and forth? I think that would be enough to frighten somebody. So her ISE didn't happen in childhood, it happened when she was in her mid-30s. You just never know, for sure. So do not automatically assume that the ISE happened in childhood. While it is true for most of the people most of the time, for some of the people some of the time, the ISE might happen in adulthood or in a real or imagined past life.
But I have a question about specific event. Again, like for forensic hypnosis, if a person says, "Oh, I was raped," do you take them back to the day, or do you go to when you were raped? Because to me, if I say I'm going to take you back when you were raped, that's like implanting a memory. I really don't know if they really were raped or not.
That's a very good point. I will preface it by saying I very, very rarely work with a woman who's been abused in that manner. But in one case where I did agree to do so, it was because I knew her fiance as a friend, and she didn't trust someone who didn't know her fiance to work with her. Because I had a couple former students who had counseling backgrounds, and one of them had counseled abuse victims. She was well qualified to work with this lady. But she said, "No, I want to work with you." So what I did is I said, don't assume. Your subconscious knows why you are having difficulty having intimacy with your fiance, so let your subconscious take you where you need to go. She said, "Well, I think that," she said, "I really think that somebody abused me when I was a little girl." And she said, "All I can think of is I was scared of the shadow man when I was little." So I said, let your subconscious take you where you need to go. And it turned out the shadow man was a relative who did something unthinkable when she was 5 or 6 years old. It was a very colorful abreaction, but since her fiance had been a friend of mine several years, I did the session in my living room rather than my office. So when the session was ended and I confirmed release, she jumped into the arms of her fiance and knocked him off the chair on the floor. And I said, "Excuse me, I think you can do the kissy-kissy later."
Get a room.
They took me to dinner, and they insisted that I have dinner with them that night. And then I got a report of great happiness from both of them a few days later. But I don't normally like to do that stuff myself. But there was another time when I got talked into it also. This lady was referred to me by both her physician and her attorney. The attorney for confidence, and also because of an injury for pain management from an auto accident, and her physician for the medical aspect of it. And then in the intake, she tells me that she first started having confidence problems when her stepfather raped her as a teenager. And then I said my usual spiel, that if you have trust issues with men, you might want to consider working with a female hypnotherapist, or perhaps an abuse counselor who's also trained in hypnotherapy. And she interrupted me before I even finished my sentence and said, no, a man hurt me. It's important to me that a man facilitate my healing. And she said, I was referred to you, and I want to work with you. I had more sessions with her than anybody I've ever worked with in 28 years in my business, because she had several different issues.
Yeah.
But regarding the alleged rape, what happened is her subconscious took her back to an earlier time where she was molested but not raped, because that was her ISE. And her stepfather was on the other side. She had some heavy-duty Gestalt role play with the deceased stepdad. And then I helped her with a couple of the other issues that she wanted, and saw her probably 13 to 15 times spread out over a period of 5 or 6 months. Then didn't see her for probably a good 3 or 4 years. I was at a Mexican restaurant one night. And, and that was when my wife was away in the Midwest. And then I saw this really attractive lady sitting at the next table. Hi, how are you? And she stands up, and the lady next to her stands up, and she, I stood up. I said, you look familiar. And she runs over and gives me a hug. She looked 5 years younger than when I had seen her for hypnotherapy. And then she introduced me to her sister and said, this is a man who gave me my life back. I had trouble holding the tears back, because that was such a confirmation to me of just how powerful these tools are when you use them properly. In her sessions, I did several regression sessions and several sessions of parts therapy to help her finally heal from all of this stuff. But we don't heal. If there's a statement that Dan Cleary makes, which I like: if therapy takes place, the client did it. Basically, I facilitated her ability to self-heal because she chose to. So that's a little bit longer response to your question than I expected to give, but I trust that it was educational for everyone.